Ah, yes. The view that us Genshin players have seen for hundreds or even thousands of times. I can barely remember the moment when I first launched this game, barely knowing what gachas are all about, and not at all expecting the sort of grind that is to come from the moment I set foot in the world of Tevat. Since then, I've accumulated hundreds or even thousands of hours in this game, and I don't even remember when it was that I actually reached AR60. All I know is that it was somewhere in 2022. So, I'm nearing the 2-year threshold when it comes to having been on that level. Yikes. And quite frankly, the experience getting there hadn't all been smooth sailing. I suffered from the whole building too many characters at once problem because I didn't know how stringent resources would be, especially in the early game, and the fact that I can't farm the materials that matter to my heart's content because of the stamina gate. Considering the fact that I just came around from playing such resource gathering intensive games like Minecraft and especially No Man's Sky, I was more than ready to spend hours farming for materials, only to realize that I technically couldn't because of this resin thing. After that, I actually almost quit somewhere before AR45, mainly due to the lack of progress, because things were really slow at the time after release, before I eventually got Jean, a character that I've been gunning for from the start. And that sort of pushed me to just, you know what, I'll keep playing this game. And after that, thankfully, Inazuma was coming next. But that was also kind of rough, both because of the wait and also because the initial story was quite ass, to say the least. The arc really only being saved by A's second story quest, and even that took a while to come out. Throughout all the story quests, world quest, and general world exploration, Inazuma was where I eventually reached AR60. Again, I don't know when. And things have been rather decent from there, but it still wasn't majorly incredible. After I hit AR60, well, farming was much easier because I've long developed a pattern of when I should prioritize certain things and when is it that I should try and start getting certain things in order to have it be ready by release of certain content. But other than that, like RNG is still horrible as always. I've lost enough limited 50/50s to C6 4 out of the 7 standard banner characters, and my luck on the weapon banner is beyond donkey sack. Like, don't even ask me. Thankfully, artifacts hadn't been all that bad, but it took me so long to be able to build out all of these characters to the point that I wanted them to be at that you'd probably be surprised at the amount of time I spent just slaving away at artifact domains. Or for those of you who are at the same situation with me, then you will understand how tedious and frustrating it can be. Grinding dailies practically became dull and repetitive, although that is to be expected, and many people have probably began feeling the same way throughout their gameplay. Much more so when it's one of those ones that has like excruciatingly long dialogues that we really don't want to replay through over and over again every time we get those quests, They should really add a skip option for that. Then you have the long ass world quests with rewards that you can get by completing the most basic level of any event stages, which kind of makes it almost not worth it to go through the whole thing unless, like me, you really love the story. For the better part, events were still mostly fun to do, except for the ones that require you to do competitive multiplayer. I think those type of contents are stupid because of how weird ping interactions are in Genshin, so it can make for some horrid experience for those who are not used to playing multiplayer when all they want to do is to get their gems, But now they have to fight other players for it. But my main problem with the events and story quests is the fact that for a game that has so many characters to choose from to put in these events and stories, they really love to neglect a very select few of them that, in my opinion, are hugely wasted just being on the sidelines. And unfortunately for me, some of them are my personal favorites. A big example are my 2 favorite OG 5 stars of the game, Jean and Diluc. Before this 4.5's Alchemy event, I can barely remember the last time any of these two have a major part to play in these events or story quests. If I remember correctly, it was back in 1.6 when the Golden Apple Archipelago first appeared. Even that was an event that had so many other characters in them that their presence just kind of gets swiped through the end of it. Yeah, sure, Diluc had his own like flashback event, but again, it's a flashback event and it really only featured him. And there's no interaction of him with other characters that I personally love more than just seeing one character appear on its lonesome by the entire event. This alchemy event from 4.5 is also one that contributes to that lack of presence, honestly. Here's one stupid fact about it, which has some spoilers for the alchemy event story, so if you care about that, you might want to skip ahead to my next thought. Okay, so if you've played this event, you'll see that Jean is featured alongside Lisa on the event page, which, if we were to apply normal event logic in the game, means that she would have a big presence throughout the event, because that's how it normally was. Sometimes even people that have big presence in the event end up not appearing in the cover page, which is alright, I guess. You know, it subverts your expectation in a good way, but this was not that. You thought she would have a big presence? The answer is no. She only appears at the end of the event and gets maybe 20 to 30 lines, and that might be being generous to say the least. And then the event story just ends. You know, sure, they keep mentioning her in the background of dialogues and information, but that does not come close to being comparable to actually appearing in the event itself. It would have made more logical sense to put Sensei Sucrose up there on the event page due to how much she appears in the game. I have my own inkling as to why they decided to put Jean there instead, but I'll keep that to myself. And of course, the one biggest problem being an AR-60 is the endgame, or the lack thereof, you know. Abyss's difficulty is mostly due to certain types of enemies that they put together in one chamber, which makes it really annoying to form team cops for. You know, you'll have two different bow requiring enemies, but they're in different chambers, which is why you're gonna have to think about, oh crap, you have to put a bow character in the first team and the second team, which for some people, they might not have a usable one for the level that the Abyss requires. This endgame issue is a whole nother problem on its own, and I feel like it deserves another video of its own, so I'll stay away from that. So you might be asking, if it all seems like crap in the end, why am I still here? Because like at this point I sound very much like this guy.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
At the end of it all, it really is kind of simple for me, because deep down, I actually love this game. But whether or not the game or the developer, for that matter, likes me back, remains really hard to be seen. The amount of crap that I give this game honestly comes from a place of love. I want this game to do better. I know that this game can do better, but at the moment, just as many other players have undoubtedly realized, Genshin is taking its player base for granted. This is a game that has over 60 million different players every month, and already has a base game that provides for so much more content to be explored and to be added. It shouldn't be that big of a risk to try and innovate new mechanics and new permanent game content. At the very least, even if it sort of flops, we know that they are trying to actually expand the game. And I think that show of effort is what we, the players, are really looking for. Do that instead of relying on hype character releases to satisfy the player's needs for a short term, only to lose that steam weeks later because the character comes out and now everyone's way past trying to get excited for them anymore. Not every character is gonna have Arlecchino levels of hype. Well, look at Shiori, for example. Look at how fast people were able to write off this 4.5 patch. They were barely able to finish the livestream update before many videos of people simply dismissing this version as a meaningless filler version pop out in droves. Up until now, Genshin has been rather lucky. They've hit an insane sweet spot with their casual player base market, and there's really no other games that can contest their side of the market. People touted Tower of Fantasy to be that first Genshin killer, but I knew that wasn't gonna happen because within days of playing the game, I could immediately tell that their story had been so undercooked and mediocre that it made Genshin's whole Inazuma arc look like a masterpiece. It certainly didn't help that Genshin released Sumeru soon after. Well, go figure. No doubt, they had great combat and overworld mechanics, but that's about it. Their UI and terminal pages are such a jumbled mess that I can understand why some people would take one look at it and go, nope, nah, I returned to that game recently just to see how the Evangelion event looks like, only to log out with vertigo. A lot of people are also putting their hopes on Wuthering Waves to be the next big thing, and I also had that bit of hope too. But the more content I see from the game, the more people are talking about it, the more that it's starting to give me Tower of Fantasy vibes. Believe me, I really hope that I'm wrong in their case, but we'll see. The thing is, these other next big thing games needs to get so many things right just to have a chance at knocking Genshin off their perch. While I say that Genshin's choice for characters to put in their stories and events have been questionable, I won't deny that they've at least made some decent storylines along the way. And they've also managed to create great stories for characters and regions that just appears out of nowhere. Shen Yun's story quest is at its core an NPC's quest, the worst type of quest for you to go through when you're expecting a character quest. But it was a great setup to the ending message for the traveler that it completely turned the quality of the story on its head and became some great storytelling material. And they've also picked up their act ever since Inazuma's story arc ended. Sumeru was an incredible change from the lackluster Inazuma arc, and Fontaine in itself is one of the finest stories to have come out from any recent gacha updates. So, if these other games are trying to beat Genshin from that side of the pool, then they might have to find themselves digging down real hard. And don't even get me started on the quality of music that Genshin has been able to create and maintain over all these new gacha games. Even with the GOAT Yu Pengchen out of the picture, they are still very much comfortably holding the fort when it comes to maintaining the quality of their soundtrack. Fontaine was also such a huge win in their part when it comes to that matter. He was not involved in the creation of the soundtrack and it was still great quality. Ironically enough, the only game that I can think of that has really been pushing people off of Genshin is none other than Star Rail. But as great as players are being treated there, Star Rail itself have quite a restricted playstyle, which makes people who favors much more dynamism at the core of their gameplay still elect to play true open world games like Genshin. Every time I ask those who play Genshin why they wouldn't at least try out Star Rail, their answers are always the same. 1. It's turn-based. Not everyone likes turn-based, and it's a bit hard to really get into it if you have no affinity for it. Plus, that other half who goes into the game and just says, well, you can't jump in this game? A bit of a funny reason to drop a game as a whole, but it further goes to solidify my point that Genshin really has this one side of the gacha open world market locked down in its entirety. So in the end, the only sort of appeal we have is with the developers itself. At this point, I'm not even expecting some grand anniversary rewards or anything remotely close to that. I've played this game for over 1200 days. It's gonna take a lot more than a disappointing anniversary to really push me off the game. Besides, they've set a bar so low with their first anniversary that people are gonna look at the coming rewards and they can just go, at least it wasn't as bad as the 1-year anniversary. Which, by the way, that is still a huge problem, but that's not the pressing matter here. I just want more permanent improvements and features in the game. Something that lasts for the long term instead of it just being some patch contents. The character build guidebook that they've implemented from this patch is a step in the right direction that is really only put in the completely wrong part of the game. Yeah, sure, it might help some new players understand what to do to improve their characters, but the way I see it, the whole book just ends up looking like a glorified version of the failed to complete domain end screen. People have been asking for loadouts for ages, and it took them this long to eventually get to that feature. Though it's personally not a problem for me since I farm separate artifacts for my characters regardless of the similarities of their roles and needs, it's obviously an important quality of life feature to have when you have so many artifacts and characters to chew through while having very little time to do so. But that's just it. These are simple quality of life changes and adds nothing to the content of the game as a whole. It's not another abyss for us to try and challenge ourselves with. which that I think would be a great starting point. Because from my perspective, there's some obvious points to put out there. Like 1, more endgame that focuses on exploring different types of gameplay mechanic the way Star Rail did with Simulated Universe and its subtypes. We need something to do more on a weekly basis. That parametric transformers should give way more things for something that you can only activate once a week. We need to have better rewards for long-term world quests and world trees, because what's the point of grinding for that long only to have the rewards be completely outmatched by simple event stages? The next point is to keep up the story quality, but with characters that actually matter for the given content. Because here's the thing, I think they spent so much time trying to give filler characters their screen time that they forget the ones that actually would have had any business in appearing on said storylines if you actually follow the lore. Like, here's an example. Why have Klee appear alongside Eula in a Sumeru event when it would have made more sense for Amber to be there? And why have Kali share 90% of her screen time with Sucrose in a Mondstadt event when all players have been asking was for her to finally reunite with Amber? Like, the whole Alice told me to do this reasonings are getting old as heck. These are narrative decisions that just doesn't make much sense, and it happens way too many times for me to be comfortable trying to justify all of it. And lastly, show your appreciation rather than just saying it on Twitter and social media posts. Words mean nothing when there are no incentives for us to believe in sincerity. Well, it's been a long video, and I hope you guys are getting where I'm going with all this, but again, don't get me wrong, I've said before that I love this game, but it's getting really hard for me to justify its shortcomings as a live service open world gacha game that has had over 3 years to listen to its player base and make meaningful changes. I can only hope that things are gonna get better, because at least with the new quality of life improvements, they are at least aware of the things that the player base have been loudly screaming for years. It's now all about getting them to listen to the little voices as well, and at least have them be aware of it. Well, if you've made it here, thank you for sticking with me so far. Oh, and I just want to thank y'all for 100 subscribers. It really means a lot to see that you guys are actually expecting content from me, and there's no bigger source of motivation than to be able to see that. Thank you for the support, and hopefully I'll be able to keep up the content. This channel is only starting, and I'm excited to push it forward. Until then, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you like the video and dislike it if you don't, and don't be afraid to share your thoughts in the comments down below if you want to. My name is Leafy, and I'll see you in the next video. Sayonara.